Good afternoon, guys. Beautiful day here in Minnesota. Sun is shining on the snow. Bright sun. You can get snow blind in a matter of minutes out there right now, but probably before the day's out, half our snow will be gone. It's going up to 45 degrees today, and we're going to have temperatures in the 40s the rest of the week, and in the 50s on the weekend. It's starting to look like spring. I just came from having my second vaccine shot. I'm probably now one of the most protected persons in America for COVID-19. I had the disease, I got all the antibodies from that, and I've had my 2 shots now. Man, I think I'll start going to church. Okay, well, let's get to work now. Last time we were talking about characteristics of mature buck effective standsites. You know, things that have got to be there for that standsite to give you really good odds of taking a big buck. And some of the things that we're going to talk about might not be as important, but almost, you know, things like, you know, there's got to be fresh tracks made by a big buck within easy shooting distance, for one. And then we talked about others, but that to me is number one. I wouldn't sit anywhere in the woods that I didn't have fresh tracks of a big buck out in front of me. So, but anyway, here's another one. And a lot of guys never think about this one. It's kind of important. Now, this is my primitive map, you know, like my maps usually are. Out here is a feeding area. It's a whitetail feeding area. And deer, this is a favorite now. There's a doe and it's young feeding out there. And it's a big one. There's probably a doe and a young feeding over there somewhere, another one here. And, you know, they stay apart pretty much. And you never know. One of them might be in heat, and you might have found evidence that one was in heat. And that would make it even more exciting. But they're out there. Now, one of the things, when you go out in the morning, they're already there. They're up. They get up around 4 in the morning. And they'll, a lot of times, you know, if the water's available, they'll go to drink water first. And then they'll go to the feeding area and start feeding really early. You know, they spend a lot of time feeding. And so up to 4 hours at a time, 4 hours in the morning, 4 hours in the evening. And half of it in the dark before morning and after dark in the evening. And so anyway, they're already there when you go out there in the morning. They're in this place here. And so it's really important for you to be able to get that to your stand site. Here's a tree with a tree stand right there, big pine tree, you know. And to get there without you never know, those deer might be feeding right out in front of there when you get there. They might not show up for a half hour or an hour, but they might be right there. Now, one of the things that a lot of guys never think of is that you have to have the trail to your stand site has to protect you from being easily seen or heard or smelled by the deer. In the morning, you should probably always, well, there's exceptions, but it's good to go to your stand site from downwind. Let's say we got a wind from the north, here's the north, blowing this direction, and in the morning you're going to go out there and the deer are already there. Well, one of the ways to make really sure they're not going to smell you is to come at them from downwind. So you go right up to your stand. Now, one of the problems that, like I was saying, most hunters don't think about it too much, but you can't, most hunters aren't really careful about getting to the stand site without being seen. You know, you can clean your trail up before the season and walk, pick your feet up, put them down lightly, and especially when you're within 100 yards of that stand, and going straight in there steady, not a lot of stopping unless to turn off your flashlight, and even then you probably won't have to do that, but you got to stop and get your eyes adjusted to moving forward in the dark, and it was under starlight or moonlight or northern light, but we do it all the time, my sons and I and grandsons. But anyway, flashlight, but you keep moving. But remember, you know, whitetails can see in the dark as well as they can by day, just like your dog or cat can see as well at night as by day. Well, now, if you are easily spotted moving to your stand, you know, you don't have good cover to make it really hard for a, you know, if a whitetail might hear a little sound, hear something coming, might get a glimpse, but unless your body is pretty well masked by cover in between you and your stand in that last maybe 50 yards or more if it's pretty open country, you aren't going to get a buck there, or your odds are way down. Now you could still get a buck. He might be way over here when you're coming in, but you can't count on it. Every time you go to one, you got to be thinking it might be right here, and that's, you know, you shouldn't say, well, maybe I'll get lucky. Well, you don't want to depend on luck when you're doing that. That last 50 to 100 yards is as important as anything you know, just about anything when you're hunting older bucks. Older bucks, like we said, well, like I mentioned before, are the big ones. Got to be big because they're the best deer in the woods at identifying hunters on the move, especially when they're on the move in the woods. They see motions, and then pretty soon they'll see enough to know, here comes a human, and I don't want to be here, so I'm going to leave this area right now. So you want good cover. Now there's a couple ways to have good cover. One is you can have good solid cover. You'll see a photo of a stand with really good solid cover. It's almost like a tunnel going into that stand site. I think you've seen it before, but really good cover between here and there. Now usually, what I'm looking for, you know, when I find a stand site, a good spot for a stand site in the woods, one of the first things I'm thinking about, do I have good cover to get there? If you're going to be going across opening or the cover is really sparse, so you'll be easily seen approaching a stand site, I know I'd be wasting my time there. Forget it. It might be what looks like a perfect place to sit for various reasons, all kinds of deer signs on it. But if you can't get there unseen or unidentified, you know, might see motions or something, but if you can't get there unidentified by deer, that's not a mature buck stand site. You're going to lose 99% of the time. You're going to be wasting valuable hunting time there. You want to be well hidden. Well, one way is that really dense cover between you and the stand. Now, you don't always find deer trails leading to a place where you'd like to sit. To start with, you know, you can clean them up. Now you got a nice trail, and it's illegal to make trails out in the woods for deer hunting. But if I can't get to a stand site because there's all kinds of dense brush in front of me, I'll do a little artful pruning. You know, I won't change the looks of it. You know, you got two branches together. If you cut one, clip one off, and there's still one there, or it's pointing upward instead of across where you'd like to walk. I might have to move from side to side a little bit, but I'm going to see if I can't figure out a way to get there, and maybe pick up dead sticks along, you know, where I'm planning to walk, and I'll be marking it with fluorescent tacks so I can see my way and almost to where I get there. But anyway, I'll try to find a way to get to that spot without being easily seen out there. So, but dense cover, you know, up where I hunt, boy, we have a lot of dense cover, so I usually don't have too much trouble. I said, gee, I'd like to be here, and you look back in the direction that you have to come from. There is dense cover. There's even a deer trail getting really close to it, or maybe it comes all the way up to the spot where you're planning to sit. That would be wonderful, and just get the dead sticks out of trails so you can walk silently on the trail. Hey guys, John and I are out here on our third day of scouting up here, and here's another one of our stop short sites. John got a big 10-pointer here last year, just up on the other side of this ridge here. When you get there, it's kind of open, so he likes to stop here and listen and watch for a while. It's usually dark about the time he gets here. And we marked this stop short site with 3 tacks. I generally do that at such spots. And in fact, he was just saying he thinks he's got stop short sites at every one of his Standsites up here. So anyway, the other thing you do when he finds this tree, he knows this is the place where his flashlight's got to go off. No more flashlight after this point. So it means he has to wait just a little bit, maybe 10-15 minutes actually, before he can decide to go up over there. If he hears anything that sounds like it might be a deer over there, or see any moving up ahead on this ridge, then he'll wait here for a while until they finally get out of the way. And there's a feeding area just the other side of this ridge. And there's a place over there where older bucks like to bed, or at least in past years they did that. So kind of a dynamite spot here, and it sure was last year. Of the 3 bucks John got last year, the biggest one came from this spot up here. Take a look back on our trail going back in the opposite direction. Up to this point you can see we got really solid cover, approach cover. This is what we like when going to a stand site, so you're hidden from view all the way to the stand site. In this place, we got a little opening across before he can sit down, so that's why we make stop short sites like this on a lot of our stand site approach trails. Another way, and our country is full of rocky ridges and high hills and little canyon-like areas in there, and another way to keep from being seen there is to stay behind intervening topography, like a high ridge. Stay on the opposite side of it, instead of going straight in, go around and come back in from the side like this. And keep that ridge in front of you all the way there, and even if it means you got to pick a different tree a little closer to the end where you run out of that intervening cover, do that. That's an excellent way to get to a feeding area. We've got several spots like this where we hunt, and using intervening cover like that next to a feeding area to get there. So that's another one. But here's another one. Let's say here's your stand tree, and here's your trail coming right toward it. You're going back in the woods here. Now, if you're going straight toward your stand site from downwind, when you're getting close to there, there's a whole, even if that trail of yours is very narrow, well wooded on both sides, the further you have to travel, and I'm not talking about like 100 yards, I'm talking about the last 10 yards, further you have to travel without adequate cover, when you're going straight in like this, the more likely it is deer over here are going to see you. They're going to spot you. So what I like to do is, instead of going straight in, is go in from an angle. And when you go at an angle with cover in front of you all the way, on your one side all the way, you're far less likely to be seen, because, when here's an angle like that, the whole thing is you got good cover all the way there than if you're coming straight at the stand site from downwind. So kind of come in at an angle. Now, sometimes I know some of these stand sites that we've used during the last 30 years were like this, where we had a ridge like that. And then in order to take the advantage of the ridge, we've had to make a big wide detour to get over there, to come into the stand site. So anyway, coming in at an angle, or using really dense cover, or using intervening topography like a high ridge, to get to your stand site without being seen makes a stand site mature buck effective. Don't forget that. I mean, every time you find a spot, you say, oh man, this is really great. Look around. Are you going to be able to get there without being seen or heard or smelled? There might be days, you know, if this is it, and you wake up in the morning, you got a south wind, forget that stand site. Hunt it tomorrow or the next day or later today. You got to wait until you have at least got a crosswind or a downwind. So we've had stands like that. I know the last really big buck my son Ken got, he had to wait. You know, he wanted to be there up there when he couldn't wait to hunt there. And finally the wind switched around so he could go in there. And within an hour after he sat in this tree stand, here it came, the biggest buck he's ever taken, and it was really worth the wait. Don't ever go to a stand site knowing something's wrong about it and say, maybe I'll get lucky. Because 9 times out of 10, well, even worse than that, 99 times out of 100, you won't get lucky. Don't count on that. And don't count on anything you can buy in the store to keep deer from smelling you out there. Always go in from downwind or crosswind, and never count on anything you can buy in a store to give you 100% protection from being smelled by whitetails. Because they're going to smell you every time, no matter what you use or what you do, except coming in from downwind or crosswind. Now, here's another thing, you know, like that. Here's another feeding area over here. Whenever you go to a feeding area, and let's say your stand site is on the opposite side, never, every once in a while, I have to relearn that. I relearned it, I think it was 3 years ago. I screwed up on a chance to take a big buck because I was in a hurry. Midday feeding cycle was about to begin, and I wanted to get there quick to be on the opposite side of this one feeding area, and I went straight across. And I got about halfway, and here come 3 does out of the woods over here, and they went by me, not bounding, just walking fast, not even turning their heads to look at me. I froze there and waited for a little bit, and then I looked back over here, and there was a deer standing in cover and had big antlers. It had this beard. And oh, how that was a bad mistake. You know, it doesn't mean the buck is necessarily laying somewhere around here when it's not feeding where it can watch that spot. Sometimes it's just a doe feeding in it, but if a doe sees you do this, that doe, mature doe, is going to remember that. They'll either not go out into this feeding area after they see you cross and then stop over here and climb a tree or something. No way, you're not going to fool a mature doe either. And if you don't fool that doe, she's going to be somewhere else feeding, and that buck is going to have to find her somewhere else. He'll be downwind, he'll smell, oh, she's not around here. And you'll maybe go look at another spot nearby, and find her there. But at any rate, don't ever cross a wide opening on the way to a stand site. When you're getting close, and especially in an area like this where don't cross the feeding area to get there. Instead, plan on it. In fact, a lot of times when we're selecting stand sites and we have a situation like that, say, boy, we wouldn't want to go there with a west wind, and that's a common wind there. Well, we got to have a way to get there even with a west wind, so we'll make a wide detour. Now, whitetails won't pay any attention to your odors, or at least they'll smell you, but they won't worry about you. They'll just keep doing what they were doing and hardly pay any attention to you. If you're 200 yards away, if they're 200 yards downwind, they just ignore you. So what we like to do, if I wanted to hunt this on the west wind, I would pick out a spot, deer trails, especially connecting deer trails, beginning 200 yards west of that stand site, and detour around, and I'll stay 200 yards as long as I'm upwind. Now I'm crosswind, I can be closer, and I can come around here and get to my stand site, staying in dense cover all the way. And that will really improve my odds of taking a big buck at this particular feeding area. never cross a big opening, especially a feeding area, on the way to a stand site. So, but doing that makes this stand site mature buck effective. Doing the things we talk here about here makes this stand site mature buck effective. But now let me tell you something else. This tree is right on the edge. Now, we've learned, for years, for some years I did a lot of research with stand site positioning, and learned quite by accident that the accident was that there was this huge pine tree fell in the woods and all kinds of branches on it, and it was about 20 yards from the edge of the feeding area out, a clear cut with lots of red osiers and sugar maple suckers growing in it. Foods whitetails love beginning the second week in November when we're hunting them up there. And so it was back in there, and at the time I thought that was kind of a handicap, being back in the woods that far from the edge of the clear cut, because you couldn't see anything down this way or anything down way. Most of what we could see was out in front, maybe an area about this wide with lots of trees in between. And there were a few spots that said, gee, I wish I could see over there. I could shoot, put my gun up and actually fire at a deer in that clear cut in more than one place, because one spot is kind of not good, unless the deer stops there. But more than likely you'll be sitting there and the deer will cross through that small opening and then you lost your chance. I like 3 chances. One over here, one over here, and one over here. And so, gee, if he crosses that one, I'll be ready for him when he crosses this one. I have my gun ready to fire, or vice versa. But I like 3 of them. And so I'm usually sitting there in a stand, and I'll instruct John, who scouts a lot with me. John, cut a few twigs off that one tree right there. See that one right there? Yeah, that one. Cut some off on the left side, and that'll kind of open it up a little bit. Now you don't need a shooting line. When you're firing a high-power rifle with a Leupold scope that can be cranked up to 7 power, you don't need a big wide shooting line. All you need is a little area, small area, that's perfectly clear. At deer height, or deer chest height, or deer neck height. You want an opening. It doesn't have to be very big. You got your scope on. Here's crosshairs, and boy, here it comes. Here's the front part of the neck. Now here's the middle, and right there is where the bony vertebrae are in that buck's neck. Pow! It'll go right down. You don't need more than that. When you're back in the woods and you got woods cover in front of you, forest cover in front of you, you'll see a lot more deer not only see a lot more deer at a stand site like that, in the course of a hunting season or several years if you go back there, but that stand site will remain productive. It'll remain mature buck effective over a much longer period of time than anyone that's right on the edge. And the reason is, no matter what you do, well, I shouldn't say that, but if you make any significant changes in the brush, trees, cutting branches, trimming here and there, doing all the things, putting a stand in a tree, all those things, you put it up there, and you're sitting up there. A deer back in the woods, you can look like that, and there's that big black silhouette against the sky. Or coming from just about any direction. It's much more visible to deer out in this clear cut or in this farm field looking in that direction. My boy, there he is. Nothing else. Every buck in the woods that's 3.5 years of age or older will instantly recognize you there. When you're back here, you have a lot more around you, a lot more helping to keep you from being recognized as a human. And so being back in there will give you a stand site that's not only more effective, but its productivity will last maybe 1, 2, 3 years beyond the season that you're hunting right now. So eventually it'll die, you know, eventually the deer that feed here come to realize this is a dangerous place and you're gonna have to find another spot. But you could maybe get 1 to 3 years of good hunting on a spot like that if it's back in the woods a little ways. I got another one. I always see deer there. I tried it, we've had that one, sitting out there. We prepared it about 10 years ago, but every now and then I get the notion, I'm going to go back there. And we built a brush blind right on the end. And over the years, the brush blind kind of settles, you know, as the wood rots. But every time I go there, I see deer there out in front of me, just feeding out in front. And every time, they're looking right at me. And I said, I don't even move, I'm just sitting there. And they're looking right over there because probably every time they get into that feeding area and they get into that area out in front, they look over there because they've learned this is a place that humans or hunters show up every now and then. So they're always wanting to be careful about that. I remember one time there were 2 does, and they were over on one side. It was kind of forest area over here. Clear cut went around to the right like that, and they were looking at me and looking. I couldn't believe it. And how could they be doing that? And I had the face mask on and everything and sitting very still. And pretty soon they disappeared. And then I didn't see them, and maybe a half hour later, 2 does. The first one raced from left to right, raced across in front of me or to where I first saw them, and just caught me by surprise. And by the time I got my gun up, they were way over here, and it was a doe, no antlers. And I said, well, I'll be damned. And then here comes another one. And I can, what in the devil are they running for like that? It must be something that alarmed them over there. Well, later when it was time to go back to camp for lunch, I walked up to the trail I used to get there, you know, and then Standsites trail was about 100 yards, and get back to this one main trail, one of our cruise trails. And when I got out there, here was tracks of the 2 does, and they had walked right in my tracks there. And obviously, you know, identified me by my trail sense. And so, and then they stopped where I had gone into the woods, and then they went on a ways, and they circled around, got way over on my left side, and you couldn't see them until they were almost straight out in front of me. And they knew I was there, so they weren't going to be careless about crossing. They wanted to be over there, so they ran one at a time. And wasn't that clever? Boy, those smart does. And that stand was right on the edge. The deer learned that this is a place frequented by humans. Not only when the human is actually there, but you know, if you've been messing around with it, building a stand there, walking in and out and things like that, you're laying down trail scent. And deer that feed right out in front of them will probably get close enough they smell trail scent, or they'll say, look at that. There, those trees weren't like that. This is a change. Why is that change? They're probably already thinking, well, could be a human that made the change, because that most changes we see like that are made by humans. So they might go over there sniffing and looking around, being real cautious and get up close and, oh yeah, this is, a human has done this, or I can smell all this trail scent all around here. You know, they've been dragging all these branches from every which way and piling them up here. Yeah, we'll just stay away from this place this hunting season. They could start doing that before the hunting season even starts, and you don't have a chance. So, back in the woods, guys, whether you're a bow hunter or a gun hunter, that's the place for your stand site, back in the woods. Okay, I'm going to make a change here now. New map. Well, here's some more things you should know about when you're selecting stand sites to hunt mature bucks and other deer. Now keep that in mind, you know. If you're really good at creating mature buck effective stand sites, or finding them and using them, you're going to see a lot more deer than the average hunter. Because, you know, that buck is not the only deer living in this area. There's other deer. Could be anywhere from 15 to 23 and maybe even 30, like in some parts of Wisconsin and Michigan, 30 deer per square mile. Wow, that's a lot of deer. And when you're really good at finding and preparing, if you have to prepare anything, a stand that'll be mature buck effective, boy, that's fun. You see a lot of deer, and some of them really close. Now, here's some more things you should know about. We talked about buck stand sites, or buck bedding areas. And buck bedding areas, let's talk about that just a little bit. Now, our whitetails migrate to winter areas, which they do even down in Texas, they do that. And South Carolina, I know that because I've studied deer in a lot in Texas. They congregate in wintering areas, bunches of them, and then they kind of divide up into does and their young and bucks, older bucks, and kind of a bachelor group. They'll bed here in this area, in this winter area, and the does over here. That's pretty common. When a big dominant buck goes back to his 1 square mile or so home range in the spring, he'll generally, unless things have changed, logging can change it, a fire can change it, trees just growing up to be real big and creating a lot of shade at ground level can make big changes as well. But generally, he'll go back and use the same bedding area he'd been using all during the previous year when he's in his home range. And he'll stay in there, he'll grow his antlers in there, it's a secluded place, hard to find. He'll grow his antlers there, and after September 1st, he'll finally start traveling all over his home range and seeing, well, who's here and what kind of, we got fawns now, new fawns here and there, they're all progeny of his from the previous year. And just checking on everything throughout his range, changes that may have occurred, trails, all that kind of thing. But once he sheds down, he's like he's been let out of jail. And boy, he traveled all over this country. Now, and then we talked about the temporary ranges, of non-breeding bucks while does are in heat. And there's little hideaways here and there. Which reminds me, I received a letter yesterday from a guy, and he said, been reading my books and watching my seminars here on YouTube for a long time now. And he was really confused by the word off-range. And he said he doesn't know where off-range is. What does that mean? And so I wrote back, if you go to YouTube, you can check on responses. There's a section there and see what I wrote. But generally, it works like this. Buck home ranges / breeding ranges when does are in heat. Buck home ranges, square mile home ranges aren't arranged like checkerboard squares, all touching one another or almost touching one another all through the area. At least not where we hunt, not at all. And it's that way almost everywhere. There's always something that separates a lot of those square miles. Where we hunt is swamps and bogs and elder swamps and cattail swamps and spruce bogs and ash sloughs, wetlands, but places where there's water on the ground, maybe puddles here and there, and some years water all over the place. But they're wetlands, and those divide them up. And then some steep sides they call them mountains out east, but they're high hills in some parts of Minnesota and up in the Iron Range country. Big high hills, old mountains up there. And that can separate them. And then waterways, streams and rivers, and we got 10,000 lakes up there. And they separate all these square mile areas. Not every square mile as everything whitetails need to live. You know, they got to have cover. In the summertime, they want cover from storms. They want some open areas. And where we hunt, they like to have some open areas up high where the wind can blow on them and keep the flies and mosquitoes off. So they need cover. And in the wintertime, cover from frigid winds and heavy snows. And then they need food. And in the summer, from spring until second week in November, they're eating greens, grasses, and leaves, and all that. Those got to be there. They're in adequate supply. And then an escape area. They got to have places where if they do get into, if they are threatened by something that might kill them, like a wolf or a bear or a human hunter, usually an escape area where they can get away from all these things really quickly is right there, right next to them. Like an ash slough or a cedar swamp or a elder swamp, something like that. Those are important to big bucks. And so if they're going to live in a place where they're going to grow antlers all year, those things got to be close by. The water, the food, the cover. That's typical for a big buck like that in these secluded areas. They don't have to travel much. It might not seem that way in farm areas because there isn't a lot of woods there for bucks to find really choice places like that for bedding, so they might bed in less choice places. And you see them feeding a lot in open farm fields. It sounds like a foreign thing to hear about bucks living in forest areas like where we hunt and study deer. But they do that. But so those bedding are used by those big bucks, are used by that buck from early spring, like beginning the last week in April, first week in May, about that day, until they migrate to their favorite wintering area in late December, earlier if there's a lot of snow. But anyway, that's used, all summer long, fall, except while does are in heat. When does are in heat, that buck is hardly there at all. It's going to be with does that are in heat. He's going to bed with the does in heat during the time that they're in heat. He's going to be feeding with the does, or he's going to be searching for does. So then we talk about these temporary areas of non-breeding bucks. And typically they're off range. And they're only used for a couple of weeks or so in the fall, when does are in heat. A few days, maybe during the week previous to that, the bucks, big dominant bucks, chase them out and they're living there. So those are just temporary little ones, and they're off range because they're afraid of this big buck. By this point, when the does are in heat, his testosterone level is huge. And he's dangerous, and they know it. Stay away from him. Yearling bucks don't know that yet. They keep sneaking back when they get chased. But at any rate, those are the ones I've been looking for lately. And each year now for about 31 years, my boys and I commonly take 2, 3, sometimes 3 bucks, these non-breeding bucks, and some of them are really big. You've seen pictures of them, living in these little off-range areas. They're in those places between ranges of dominant breeding bucks, separated by all these things. And some of those ranges, like I say, they might look okay to you, but they aren't okay to deer, and they just don't live there because it doesn't provide them with everything they need, the safety, and the food and cover and whatnot. Not everything is there. So where we hunt, they're separated a lot by wetlands. The country we hunt is about, I would say it's about 30 to 40% wetlands. The country we hunted for 30 years before that in Aiken County, and that was my first study area there. That was about 50% wetlands. And so there's a lot of separation between a lot of those buck home ranges. So off range is in those areas in between. And it can be all over the place, but there are places where the big buck doesn't go. He doesn't stay in his range to protect his does from other bucks, other bucks that might try to breed if they have a chance. And so they're out there until breeding is over, and then they come back to their home ranges. And pretty much they stay there then until they migrate in the spring, even though there are 2 more periods of breeding to follow. Okay, so now that's where off-range is. I received an email from a guy who wanted to know where off-range was. It was his feeling that, judging by what he had read, that, down the buck home ranges are a square mile and they're back to back all over the area where you hunt. And it might be that way in some places, but not really. And I've found places in South Carolina and Texas and, that are the same. There's something that separates. In Texas, it might be desert areas, but there's separations. And so they aren't together. There's lots of off-range areas for these non-breeding mature bucks to hide while does are in heat. Now here's a map, not a complete map, but here's a big feeding area here. And here's a doe bedding area. Now look at, here's these buck bedding areas. They're really small, most of them. On range, like this big dominant breeding buck, might be only an acre or so in size. And these little things off range where the non-breeding bucks go, they're about half an acre, a lot of them, that'd be an acre. But doe bedding areas are big. They can be 10 to 20 acres in size. And so, when you're scouting, for example, and you come to a place and you find what you say, well, this got to be a doe bedding area. None of these beds are longer than about 36, 38 inches, mature doe size, or a yearling buck staying with its mother. And here's smaller ones, down to 3 feet in diameter, fawn-sized beds here, in this deep grass or in this snow or what. When you find one, don't think this is it. You gotta look around a little bit more, because well, you might be looking at a spot right in the middle, and then you get it right in the middle there when you're going to hunt this area, because you're expecting this doe is in heat, and this buck is going to be with the doe in it between feeding her during midday hours. If you're right in the middle, you're screwing it up real bad. Your chances of seeing a deer there are not going to be very good at all. You got to be out to one side crosswind. We talked about that before, because generally whitetails, when they go to their bedding areas, they'll come in it from downwind, so they can check it out by air, by scent alone, airborne scent alone, see if there's anything dangerous in that bedding area. They do that with feeding areas too, generally. Keep that in mind, so we'll talk about that next. So anyway, expect that whenever you find beds like that, and a lot of droppings, and not necessarily a lot of trails, but there's 2 places where you find a lot of droppings in the woods, or 3 actually. One is in a feeding area, a current favorite feeding area. You'll find droppings all over the place, fresh and old. And in a bedding area, the first thing whitetails do when they stand up after they've been bedded is empty their bowls. So there's going to be quite a few droppings in a bedding area as well. And the third place is a winter area. There's all kinds of them in there. But usually when you're scouting, none of those in a winter area will be fresh. It'll be all old droppings, and they're dried out and dull and light as styrofoam. You know right away that these are really old. Those are the 3 places. So anyway, beds and tracks and droppings. And they'll define it. Now, it's not terribly important for you to know the whole extent of a doe bedding, but there'll be deep grasses probably in parts of it. They love to bed in deep grasses when they have fun. And it'll be mixed timber. There'll be brush and some larger trees. And also, you'll see some pictures here of some beds in snow, and you'll see one place that's kind of brushy, and there's some a doe and one of its young bedding over there in that brush a little far, you know, a little ways from the camera, you'll see some taken here in this area of bedded deer as well. But at any rate, but once you find one of those, like I say, expect it to be big. Don't get too close to that spot where they bedded, where the beds are obvious, look like they were just made. Stay away from them a little, at least within sight, within easy shooting lanes, crosswind. Because, like if you go there, say 9 o'clock in the morning, those deer are feeding somewhere. They're not here, they're over here maybe, feeding. And you're going to catch them when they come back. And so you get there early and they're gone, and you want to be sitting down. What they're going to do is come in from downwind. So count on that. You might want to be sitting out toward the downwind side, but crosswind from that side. Then when they leave, they're going to go they're going to go into the wind outward from there. Okay, so keep that in mind when you're selecting a stand site. Here's another thing. A lot of feeding areas, not all of them, but a lot of them will have an area around one of the peripheries that I refer to as a staging area, a place where deer like to go. I don't know if they do it in the morning, they probably do. They go in there before feeding and spend time there, especially if it's on downwind, but it might be crosswind, but they like to go in there and spend time there gazing out over that feeding area to see if anything's moving out there. You know, now a human might be sitting around there somewhere in a tree stand or something, or on ground level, but they're going to be there and they're going to be watching for motions, anything moving out there. Now, generally, most feeding areas have older ones. A new clear cut won't have them yet, but it takes a little while for it to form. But deer will have a trail, a periphery trail goes all the way around there. And quite often, you know, if, like say the wind is from the north in this way and they're coming in here, they won't just stand here and sniff and look around to decide whether it's safe or not. They can move up around the edge here and move up around the edge here, and that way pick up scent from the entire area being carried to them by air. So these periphery trails are kind of important to the deer, you know. They form because, gee, here, like say one day the wind was from the east, so they spent a lot of time here on this side checking the scent if something dangerous was in their vicinity from downwind before actually going out there. Because they know they're vulnerable out there. They're busy eating, their heads down, they can't see anything then. They're chewing, you know, like grass or woody stems of various shrubs at the end. It's noisy. You know, it's like you were chewing on potato chips. Crunch, 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 you know, you put it in the mouth. Well, that kind of smothers any sound that might be made, subtle sounds might be made by hunters or wolves or bears or whatever in the area. And so they know they're vulnerable out there. And usually, like does when they're feeding, one of them or their progeny is always got his head up when the other's heads are down. And the other one's head's down, they usually wag their tail once before they move, you know. Wags his tail, it's hope that one's his head's gonna come up and it's gonna step up a little bit down, its head goes and starts. Then that one, mother's got her head down, I'll stand here and watch a little bit, and then she flicks her tail once and you know, oh, now she's gonna raise her head and chew. So he can put his head down, or she, or whatever. So somebody's always acting as a sentinel that way. And big bucks get that too, you know, when they're with a doe and heat. That mother and her progeny will be acting as guardians of that big buck by always being on guard with their heads up when all the other deer have their heads down feeding. But that buck is being protected by those other deer. But anyway, so keep that in mind. They come from downwind, they leave downwind. But if they got a staging area, except for a wind blowing from the north in this case, if it's crosswind or whatever, they'll calmly gather together. It can be a dozen deer in that staging area if this is a real popular feeding area. in the evening. They start gathering in there about, up to an hour before before dark. And they're in there and they're watching and looking. Now, staging areas are full of trails. They are going all over the place in there. Much more than anywhere else around. There's trails and trails. You can't take 10 steps in any direction in a common staging area without stepping into another trail. And there's droppings all over and urine in the snow, and there'll be a few antler rubs in there, and maybe a ground scraper too. But so it'll just, when you get into it, you say, holy cow, the deer spent a lot of time here. But they're tough to hunt. But there again, let's say the wind is from the south, and you go out in the afternoon. If you get up here on the downwind side of that, those deer are going to be coming from downwind. They'll be coming from this direction. They'll smell you long before they would even see you. You won't even know they're there. And they'll say, oh, we're not going to feed here today. So it'll go somewhere else and feed. So downwind in the afternoon is a terrible time. Now in the morning it's all right because they won't even be in there anymore. They'll be out here feeding, so you can be downwind in the morning. But when you do that, you're going to leave trail scent that lasts 4 days. And so that evening, when the deer come, that fresh trail scent made by him in here. We're not going out here. We'll go somewhere else. That trail scent can be ruinous to future hunting at that stand site. So even in the evening, in the afternoon, you should be crosswind, not downwind or upwind on a feeding area or a staging area. Crosswind, because those deer will be coming from downwind, you see? So keep that in mind. And then have all the other elements of a mature buck effective stand site there. Those are easy to find in a staging area, but you don't want to be in the staging area because if you're in there, no matter what the wind direction is, they're going to know it because that's where they like to gather. And you don't want your trail scent or airborne scent anywhere around that staging area. You want to be over to one side. It might make it hard to see deer moving in there if you got really heavy forest cover there, but if you get over on one side, you'll get, they're moving around. They aren't laying down, chewing their cuds and sleeping or anything. They're running to go out here, so they are moving around in there, and some breeding goes on in there even while those are in heat during that period. So keep that in mind. Staging areas can be, that concentrates the deer that feed here. So that's a good place to go, but it's hard to hunt. Don't leave any trail scent around close to that thing when you're going to a stand site. Make detours or whatever to get around them. And then hunt crosswind. Okay, got that? Okay, so that's some things I want to tell you about. Now, I'm gonna put together a number of other situations that you need to know about. Hey guys, you know, I've still got this many spots to talk about, 9 of them. And I don't want to just say, well, watering spots are good. You know, I want to talk to you a little more about that. And there's others here like trail hubs, places where 2 or more trails come together. And some of those can be dynamite. Not all of them. Detour trails made by deer. Once they got you spotted at a stand site, you think, oh, this is wonderful. If you start spending a lot of time there and then come back next year and do the same thing, the big bucks that normally frequent that area are going to be detouring you. They're going around you to get to feeding areas or watering spots or bedding spots or whatever. Look for those. And generally, you're just going to see big buck tracks on those trails, but look for them. And they can be minor deer trails, but dynamite buck trails. So, and then crossing, there's all kinds of crossings, like here's an opening. And the deer's on this side and he wants to go on that side, and it's a hunting season. He doesn't dare go across that opening. But up here a little ways, there's a point that sticks way out into the opening, or there's an island in the opening, so you can go from here to there or to the other side, you know, without being seen over a great distance for a long time. You know, things that provide cover along the way, or maybe a windbreak. You know, trees and fields that follow those, or fence lines that got brush or brushy stream bottoms, things like that. They'll make use of those to reduce the amount of time that they're exposed, completely exposed when moving. So there's all kinds of crossings to talk about. Backside perimeter trail. Well, you can look that up everywhere. You won't find anything about backside perimeter trails, except maybe in some of my articles I've written for outdoor magazines in the past. But that's one of those things that can be a dynamite place to hunt, stand hunt, in areas where there are a lot of other hunters. Hunters on foot, hunters making drives, all kind of, you know, really bothersome, you know, it just makes stand hunting really difficult. But the backside perimeter trails are the places to be stand hunting, but you got to get there early. Well, so that's one. We'll talk more about that. Buffer zone trails. You know, we talked about a doe home range having all kinds of trails in it. You can have 4 or 5 of them in a square mile of a typical dominant buck home range. And most trails are within the doe home ranges, and then there's just a few in between. And especially when bucks are making and maintaining ground scrapes, or while does are in heat, those buffer zone trails can be kind of a funneling trail. There aren't many trails between this doe range and that one, and here's this one, and there's good cover along that. And that's the trail that they're going to use to go from this doe range to that doe range. And it'd be kind of nice to know which of those buffer zone trails is most used by bucks from mid-October until mid-November. And you find fresh tracks on that, and maybe 3-4 sets of where you're going back and forth on there. That can be a dynamite place to take a big buck. And then funneling elements, like say here, a deer wants to go from this area to that feeding area over there, and there's a swamp, elder swamp on this side, and elder swamp on this side, and it narrows down. So it's kind of a narrow distance in between, and then it opens up when you get to the feeding area there. Or it could be an open field, tilled field, it could be a lake, there could be streams on both sides, it could be really dense cover as opposed to less dense cover, things like that. They funnel deer movements to get one place to another. My son Dave got a nice buck last year in such an area. So, that's a good one to know about, and to be able to identify and look for. Saddle areas. If you hunt in mountainous areas or areas of high hills, like in Pennsylvania, New York, Catskill Mountains, even here in Minnesota, we got high rocky hills and steep sides. A saddle is an area between the two. It might be only half as high, or quarter as high. There's mountains on each side, and if the deer want to go from here over to there somewhere, they're going to go in the saddle area rather than up over the mountains or high hills on each side, and that's the saddle area. And we've had all kinds of good luck hunting deer near or at saddle areas over the last 30 years. We've got some like that. So that's a good one to know about. Escape trails. This is another one to know about if you're hunting an area where there's a lot of other hunters. And usually they're on the other side of one of these backside perimeter trails. And if you're hunting on the backside perimeter trail and there's an escape trail there and it looks like it's been used lately, fairly fresh tracks of deer on the snow there, hunt there. You not only got the perimeter trail, but you got this escape trail in one place. It's kind of like a trail hub. And your odds of taking a buck or other deer are going to be much better there than some place where there is not a escape trail, a place where you gotta go. You know, the deer might go back there, but then they'll travel along the perimeter trails to get to the escape trail and then go out there. But yeah, unless they're in a big hurry, then they'll go just about anywhere. So these are more I want to talk about. And then finally, I want to show you something. Here's a set of my Whitetail sign guides. There's 12 cards here, they're laminated. One of the cards is called Buck Standsites. And there's what? 15 Buck Standsite areas listed in here. And a lot of them are these same things here. But that's a good card to have. There's a little map on one side showing, you know, possible locations of where all these things are. And then not only how to identify these things, but when to hunt them. Like for example, let's say a scrape trail, you know, ground scrape trail, during the last half of October and the first few days of November. That's time to hunt scrape trails. And you hunt them from first light to sunset. One of the few trails where you really shouldn't be walking back and forth in the middle of the day. Just by the time you do that, when you come back, the buck is passed. Stop, renew the scrape that you were watching while you were gone. I've had that happen so many times. Oh, geez, I just wasted the whole morning, the whole day, because I left here in the middle of the day. When during this period, bucks are on the move all day long. They might stop for a little while one place and another place, you know. They aren't as regular as you'd like them to be, like always renewing this ground strip at 12 noon every other day. But there are scrapes like that. And so, but if you're going to hunt scrapes, be there all day. Take a lunch along. Don't have rattly paper, you know, have a plastic bag with your sandwiches in there, maybe an apple or something, cookies. Take them with you and plan to stay there all day, and take along a container if you have to go potty in the meantime. Urinate. So, but scrape trails, and that card tells you when to hunt them. And okay, and during the wet rut phase, you know, in this case the scrape trail rut phase 2, it says right there. Things you learned about in the past. Well, now let's say here's a doe family bedding area. You hunt that. Well, I wouldn't necessarily go with that. First light to sunset, hunt that all day. Now, if I'm going to hunt a doe family bedding area, I've learned since I made this card, I'd hunt there from about 9 till about 4. And they'll be in there. And if the doe isn't hate, they'll be moving around in that area, and your chances of seeing a buck with a big doe, if the doe is in hate, are excellent. But yeah, go there after does, wild does are feeding somewhere, and be there. And then in the late afternoon, they're going to leave there to go feed. So there's 2 times they're going to be going in or out of that place, which also increases the chance you're going to see them. But it tells you where to sit, you know. Like in the evening, you want to be on the upwind side, one side, you know, crosswind on one side of a trail leading out of there. And that's where it's going to go in the evening when it leaves. And in the morning, when they come back, they're going to come in from downwind, so you would be one side crosswind of a trail going into the bedding area. Remember now, the bedding area is big. Well, let's see, one more here. Here, like your staging area. It's dense cover adjacent to a feeding area with lots of tracks and droppings. And you hunt there first light to 11 a.m. and again in the afternoon, if you need to, from 2 p.m. to sunset. Crosswind, always. Here's watering spot. First light to 11 a.m. only. Well, why is that? Well, in the morning they go early, in the dark, to drink water, but I've taken bucks when they're done feeding and they're going down to drink water, they commonly go to water after feeding. My son Ken got one that came down the watering spot in the evening or after feeding in the morning. And I've taken one, I knew it was feeding in this one area, and one end was a spring-fed pool that Buck often drank at because his tracks were all around it. And those are good spots to know about. In the evening, you might as well forget it, because chances are in the afternoon when it's light and there's hunters in the woods and the big buck knows it, he probably won't go to that watering spot during daylight hours. He'll go feeding, and he'll plan on watering really heavily after dark. And so in the afternoon they have a tendency to feed, well, they feed into the wind, zigzagging. They can be going crosswind every which direction for short distances, but they're moving generally in the direction of where they're going to water. And then they'll get there after dark. So you're kind of almost wasting your time. I've never gotten one at a watering spot in the afternoon, but in the mornings I have. So now, another place that's very similar, they probably water there, but it's also like a ford, where they've been crossing a stream or a small river, and you see the trail coming down in the water and then coming up on your side, and it's well used, all pockmarked with fresh tracks. Holy cow. But same story, whether they water there or not, same hours apply. So those are good things to know about. Well, there's all kinds of information like that on this card. So might be a reason why you might want to have this when you deer camp each fall. You want to refer to this. I found this place here. Let's say it's a crossing. Well, you can hunt there first light to 11 or 3 p.m. to sunset. During any phase of the rut. Okay, good thing to know. Like backside perimeter trail, first light to sunset. That's one of those places where they bring a lunch. There's a lot of other hunters out in the woods, but you're out there beyond them where they usually go. That's what the backside part is about. Well, enough said. So I can't possibly, it's going to take me another hour to go over these things with you guys. And that's going to be a challenge for me, you know that. So with that, you look for these subjects to come up next time I see you. And with that, I want to thank you for watching. Now, remember this too, all the things that are on that card are in this card and then some. You can only put so much information on one of the little cards. It's good information, but you get down to the nitty-gritty on these things in my book, my latest book, my Whitetail Hunter's Almanac, 10th edition. So, if when you can swing it, I know times are tough now for a lot of us financially, but it's not like you're going to buy a new gun or an ATV or something. This is just a book. It costs $35. So this is going to provide you with more good hunting than anything else you can buy. There's nothing else that can give you all you're going to learn from this book. Unless somebody completely copies everything I wrote in here and puts it in a book form. You want this book, and sometime in the future, so you get a chance, sock a little money away now and then, get your book. The best advice I can give you, other than giving you these seminars. Free seminars, how about that? But you can't carry them around the woods or in deer camp. You need something like this one. So, okay, with that, be sure now before you check out, hit the subscribe button down below here, that bar down, the red one. Be sure to hit the subscribe button down below and the thumbs up if you think you learned something worthwhile today. And you did, you know that. And so, do that for me as a favor to me. I've been giving you free seminars for a long time. That's my favor to you. Now I want you to do the same for me. hit that subscribe button and that thumbs up button, will you please? And thank you. And I'll see you again soon. Be sure to visit my website. Here's the link. Here you'll find links to my blog posts, my Twitter account, my YouTube account, my Amazon store with links to my ebooks, my son's eBay store, a money saver if you're ordering from Canada or other countries, my website bookstore, and much more.